my name's Randall. I'm 62 years old. And for the last 36 years, I thought I had a solid marriage. I'm talking Sunday morning waffles, summer road trips to Montana, sitting on the porch in the evenings kind of marriage. My wife's name is Lynette. We met in 1987 at the University of Oregon Library. She was this quiet, smart girl with a worn copy of The Sun Also Rises in her lap and one of those oversized cardigans hanging off her shoulder. I knew from the moment she smiled at me that she was the one. We've lived in the same two-story house in Salem, Oregon for over 25 years. Olive green siding, little maple tree out front, wind chimes on the porch. Our kids grew up here. They're gone now, one's in Austin, the other in Vermont. It's just been me and Lynette for a while now. 3 years ago, I retired from my job as a technician for a telecommunications company. My knees were shot, and my vision wasn't much better. But I didn't mind slowing down. I liked the quiet. I liked fixing the loose kitchen drawer or organizing the basement on rainy days. I'd make coffee every morning in my old Hamilton Beach machine and read the local paper. That was my peace. Lynette, on the other hand, never slowed down. After teaching middle school English for decades, she switched careers in her late 50s, got into freight logistics, of all things. She worked her way up to a regional management position at a company called Freightbridge. I was proud of her. Honestly, I was. She had a fire in her I always admired. But the job came with frequent trips down to their Southern California office. San Bernardino, mostly. Sometimes San Diego. I didn't think much of it at first. She packed light, usually wore navy business suits, and always left her wedding ring on. She'd come home tired, kick off her shoes by the door, tell me stories about crazy meetings and awkward hotel buffet. I never questioned it. But 2 weeks ago, something changed. It was a Sunday night. The house was still warm from the afternoon sun, and I was sitting in the living room with the ceiling fan spinning slow above me. I had the Mariners game on, volume low. I heard the front door open. Her key always has that metallic click you can hear from any room. Normally, she'd drop her bag, call out something like "You won't believe what happened at baggage claim," and give me a quick kiss. But that night, nothing. She walked in wearing a charcoal gray pantsuit I hadn't seen before, the blazer still buttoned. Her hair was tighter than usual, pulled back in one of those no-nonsense buns. No eye contact. She didn't even glance at Mabel, our old golden retriever, who wagged her tail hopefully. "Hey, babe. How was the flight?" I asked, muting the TV. She was already halfway to the kitchen. "Fine," she said flatly, not even turning her head. I followed her in. She poured herself a glass of white wine, some brand I didn't recognize, not her usual Riesling, and stood by the window, staring out into the backyard. She didn't take off her heels. Didn't take off her watch. Her left hand rested on the granite counter, but I noticed something. Her ring was gone. "You okay?" I asked. "Just tired. Meetings ran long. I need to decompress," she muttered, sipping her wine. There was something off in her voice, too rehearsed, too cold. She smelled different too. Not her typical floral body wash. Something muskier. More masculine. She didn't eat dinner. Said she wasn't hungry. Went upstairs early and shut the bedroom door before I even finished rinsing the plates. I sat at the dining table for a long time that night. The overhead light buzzed faintly, and the fan blades above creaked every so often. I stared at her half-full glass of wine on the windowsill. The condensation had started to bead, trailing down onto the tile. I didn't know what it meant, but my gut did. Something had shifted. Something quiet and dangerous. And then the next night, I heard her whispering upstairs behind a locked door. That was the moment it all started unraveling. The night I heard her whispering behind the locked door, something inside me cracked. It was past 10 p.m. I'd just come back from walking Mabel. The air was crisp, that early spring kind of chill that smells like damp earth and pine needles. I remember standing on the porch for a few seconds longer than usual, watching the neighbor's motion light flicker from a raccoon rustling through their trash. When I came back in, the house felt too still. Too silent. No TV. No rustle of Lynette moving around in the bedroom. Just the soft creak of floorboards as I walked past the stairs. That's when I heard it, her voice. Low. Almost a whisper. But I could tell it wasn't directed at herself. She was talking to someone. And the tone, it wasn't casual. It wasn't annoyed. It was tender. I crept up the stairs, careful to avoid the third one from the top. It always lets out a groan. Her office door was closed, light coming from the crack at the bottom. I paused in the hallway, holding my breath. She laughed. It was soft. Faint. But it was a laugh. That kind of laugh you make when someone says something flirtatious and you pretend not to be affected. I didn't hear any other voice. Just hers. But I knew damn well she wasn't talking to our daughter, or her co-workers, or anyone she'd openly chat with at 10 p.m. behind a locked door. I backed away. Slowly. My chest tight. I went downstairs, didn't even take off my shoes. Just sat down on the arm of the couch, staring into the dark kitchen, trying to figure out if I'd finally lost my mind. I wanted to knock on that door. I wanted to ask her point blank who the hell she was talking to. But I didn't. I froze. The kind of freeze that comes from denial, from a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there's another explanation. But the next morning, things didn't get better. She came downstairs wearing a plain beige hoodie and black leggings, her hair in a messy bun. She barely looked at me. Poured herself a glass of orange juice, no coffee, which was strange, and scrolled through her phone like I wasn't even there. "Sleep okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said quickly, without looking up. There was something sterile in her answers now. Like she'd rehearsed them. Like she had a script and was sticking to it so she wouldn't trip up. She left for work around 8:30. Normally she says goodbye, kisses my cheek, pats Mabel's head. This time she just grabbed her keys and walked out. The second the front door closed, I sat there at the kitchen table, still clutching my coffee, and I knew. I just knew. Not because she'd said anything. Not because I had proof. But because 36 years with someone gives you a sixth sense. You know the scent of their happiness. The rhythm of their comfort. And whatever was between us, it was broken. I tried to tell myself it was stress. Her job. Her age. Maybe hormones. I even Googled emotional distance in long-term marriages. That's how desperate I was to find a reasonable excuse. But then I checked our phone bill. I don't usually do that. I pay it, file it, forget it. But this time I pulled up the online statement and sorted by outgoing calls. And there it was. A number I didn't recognize. Logged over and over again. Late at night. Early in the morning. Lunchtime. Texts, hundreds. I copied the number into Google. Nothing came up. No business listing. No name. Just a regular cell phone. Area code 619, San Diego. My heart sank. San Diego. That's where she'd been flying almost every other week. I stared at the number for a long time, my hands shaking. Mabel came over and rested her head on my thigh like she could feel the tension bleeding off me. I didn't call it. Not yet. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear a man's voice on the other end, or worse, her voice if I caught them together. Instead, I sat in my recliner, phone on my lap, blinds pulled halfway closed, and I waited for her to come home. When she walked through the door that evening, I looked up at her, trying to see her the way I always had, my wife, my best friend, the woman I used to write stupid love notes to and stick on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cow. But all I saw was distance. She kicked off her sneakers, glanced at me, then immediately went upstairs. Not a word. And I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending this was okay. That this was normal. I couldn't ignore that my wife had emotionally left our marriage while still sleeping under our roof. So I made a decision. The next time she locked that office door, I'd be ready. And this time, I wouldn't just be listening. I waited 3 nights. 3 nights of pretending everything was fine while my stomach twisted in knots every time she glanced at her phone or stayed too long upstairs. I started noticing the smallest things, how she double-checked the front door lock before heading up, how her eyes darted to her watch anytime I asked a question, how she changed her passcode from the one she'd used for 10 years. It used to be our anniversary. Now, I couldn't even guess. By the 3rd night, I had a plan. It wasn't sophisticated, but it didn't need to be. I waited until she went upstairs. She had that same routine, glass of wine, laptop in hand, slippers shuffling on the hardwood floor. Around 9:45, I heard the click of her office door locking. The old brass knob sticks if you don't twist it just right. She knew that. I knew that. I stood in the hallway outside the room for a while. Just listening. Mabel lay at the bottom of the stairs, ears perked, tail still. Even she could feel something was wrong. Then I heard it again. Her voice, low, quiet, warm. That same softness I hadn't heard in months. It was like eavesdropping on a version of my wife that didn't exist with me anymore. She was laughing. Not the dry, polite kind she gave me when I made a joke, but a real one. Deep from the chest. I hadn't heard that laugh since before Christmas. I leaned in closer, pressing my ear to the door. "No, I haven't told him anything," she whispered. A pause. Because he'd fall apart, that's why. Fall apart? I stepped back, my jaw clenching so tight it ached. I didn't need to hear the rest. The tone of her voice, the timing, the secrecy, it was all right there, slapping me in the face. I walked downstairs and into the garage, flipping on the cold fluorescent lights. The smell of sawdust and old motor oil hit me like a wave. I grabbed the spare set of keys to her car. She'd left her Mercedes parked outside since she got back from her trip. Said she was too tired to pull it into the garage. I opened the trunk. There, beside her suitcase, was a slim black garment bag. I unzipped it slowly. Inside was a red cocktail dress. Sleek. Silk. Not something you wear to business meetings. Not even the company holiday party. It was too tight, too short, too intentional. And next to it, in a side pocket, a pair of black Louboutin heels, 4-inch stilettos. I hadn't seen her in heels that high since our 25th anniversary dinner at the Timberline Lodge. That's when it hit me. She hadn't just fallen into something emotional. She wasn't just texting or sharing feelings. This was physical. I slammed the trunk shut, my pulse hammering. I leaned on the hood for a second, trying to breathe. The air in the garage was stale, filled with the scent of old rubber and the faint sweetness of that goddamn air freshener she liked, vanilla and lavender. It made my stomach turn. I didn't go back inside right away. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, gripping the wheel, listening to the creak of the house settling. Everything felt surreal. Like my life had tilted 5 degrees and I hadn't noticed until now. When I finally walked in, she was already in bed. Her laptop was shut. Her face freshly washed. She looked up from under the duvet like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said. "You okay?" I stared at her for a beat too long. Yeah. Just had trouble sleeping. She nodded and turned off the lamp without another word. I lay awake the entire night, staring at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above me. The blades clicked faintly at the same point every rotation. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, over and over, like some ritual to keep myself from shuddering. The next morning, I didn't wait for her to leave for work. I was already dressed when she came downstairs, jeans, flannel shirt, work boots I hadn't worn in months. She looked at me over the rim of her coffee mug. "You going somewhere?" she asked. "Yeah." "Got some things to check on," I said. She didn't press. Just gave a slight nod and went back to scrolling her phone. I took my truck and drove 2 towns over to a place called Brighton Wireless. They do data recovery. Surveillance. Stuff most people don't ask too many questions about. I told the guy behind the counter, young, scruffy beard, Red Bull in hand, that I wanted to recover deleted texts and photos from an old iPhone. I handed over the spare device I'd synced to our shared iCloud account years ago. She'd forgotten it even existed. He raised an eyebrow. "Might take a couple days. You cool with that?" "I'll pay extra for one." He nodded slowly, like he knew exactly what was going on. "Been getting a lot of these lately." As I walked out, the sky turned gray. It started to drizzle. The kind of rain that soaks into your clothes without you noticing until it's too late. I sat in my truck and stared through the windshield as drops trickled down. Everything outside looked blurred. Washed out. Just like the life I thought I had. I didn't know exactly what I was going to find on that phone. But whatever it was, I was ready. And God help her if she lied again. I barely slept that night. Not that I was expecting to. I laid in bed with the covers pulled up to my chest, staring at the outline of Lynette's back as she slept just inches away, her breathing slow and even, like nothing in the world was wrong. Like she hadn't carved a hole straight through me with silence, secrets, and a damn red cocktail dress I never knew existed. She always slept on her right side, facing the window. Used to be, she'd curl her legs into mine and mumble something about how cold her feet were. I used to pretend to groan, but I never minded. That tiny gesture, her reaching for me in the dark, was everything. But now, there was a full foot of space between us. A void. A wall I didn't build, but now had to live with. The next morning, she left early for work. Didn't kiss me. Didn't ask what I was doing that day. Just grabbed her bag, said don't forget to feed Mabel, and was gone. I watched her taillights disappear down the street through the slats of the blinds. Around 11 a.m., I got a text from the guy at Brighton Wireless. "Devices ready. You might want to sit down before you open anything." That was it. No context. No pleasantries. Just that. I didn't reply. I just grabbed my jacket, called Mabel into the house, locked up, and drove. When I walked into the store, he was already at the counter with a USB drive and a manila folder. "Everything's in here. Photos, deleted texts, call logs. You'll want to check the file labeled Hidden Albums. And there's a Notes app entry you might want to read." My stomach turned. He slid the folder toward me, then lowered his voice. "Look, I don't usually say this to clients, but you seem like a good guy. Whatever you're about to read, don't take it out on yourself." I didn't say anything. Just nodded, took the drive, and left. I didn't go straight home. I parked at Glenmore Park, by the old baseball field. It was cold, gray, the kind of day where the clouds hang so low you feel like they're pressing on your shoulders. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat, plugged in the USB, and clicked. The folder opened with a soft chime. There were hundreds of messages. Most of them were short, flirtatious. Some were, less subtle. Miss your hands. Can't stop thinking about that night in the hotel. Does he suspect anything yet? The sender was saved as A. Just the letter. Probably some pathetic attempt at privacy. I scrolled through photos next. A few were screenshots of memes and articles, things I'd expect between coworkers or friends. But then it shifted. Selfies. Her in that red dress, posing in what looked like a hotel bathroom mirror. Her hair curled. Makeup heavier than I'd seen her wear in years. Then another, her in bed, bare shoulders, tousled sheets behind her. My hands started shaking. I clicked on the Notes app export. There was only one file, titled Chicago. I hesitated, then opened it. It wasn't a note. It was a letter. A long one. Addressed to A. She wrote about me. About how I was distant, more like a roommate than a husband. She said she felt alive again when she was with him. That with me, it was like living in a museum, quiet, dust settling, everything exactly where it was 20 years ago. The last paragraph killed me. I don't think I can go back to pretending. I love him. I always will. But I'm done lying to myself. I want something real. Something real. As if 36 years, 2 kids, a mortgage, surgeries, birthdays, holidays, all of that, was imaginary. I slammed the laptop shut. The field outside was empty, save for a lone jogger in a neon jacket making loops around the dirt path. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, breathing through my teeth like I was trying not to drown. She wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me. I drove home in silence. No radio. No thoughts. Just this numb, cold anger growing in my chest like a storm that wouldn't break. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. She was home early. I walked in through the garage. The house smelled like roasted vegetables and lemon cleaner, her usual I'm making up for something scent combo. She was in the kitchen, chopping sweet potatoes on the cutting board. "Oh hey," she said, not looking up. "Thought I'd make that lentil salad you like." I stood in the doorway, watching her, my hands still clenched in fists at my sides. She turned and smiled. "You okay?" I didn't answer. She tilted her head. "You look pale." "You sure you?" "I know." The knife in her hand paused mid-chop. She blinked. "What?" I took a step closer. "I know about him. I know everything. The texts. The photos. The hotel. The letter." Her face drained of color. The knife clinked against the board as she set it down slowly. For a second, the only sound in the kitchen was the soft hum of the fridge. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Randall. I can explain." But there was nothing left to explain. And now, it was my turn to disappear behind a door. I didn't storm out, and I didn't scream. I think that's what threw her off the most. She was standing there, barefoot on the kitchen tile, knife still on the board, mouth slightly open like she didn't expect the confrontation to come so quietly. "But what do you say to the man you've been lying to, day after day, in your shared home, while he grilled burgers for you, ironed your blouse, picked up your prescriptions?" I just walked past her and into the hallway. She followed. "Randall, please, can we just talk?" Her voice cracked, but not in the way I wanted it to. Not with guilt. With fear. Fear of being found out. Fear of losing the backup plan. I stopped at the hall closet, pulled out a duffel bag. Not mine, hers. The dark green one she always used for her weekend trips. Funny how a piece of fabric could suddenly look so cruel. "Where are you going?" she asked, but her voice had dropped to something more fragile, more manipulative. I didn't answer. I walked into our bedroom and opened the top drawer of her nightstand. She still kept the extra charger there, along with gum, lotion, and a pair of reading glasses she never used. "Randall," she said again, this time sharper. "You can't just shut down like this. You owe me a conversation." I turned to face her. She was leaning on the doorframe like she owned the space. Like this wasn't her fault. Like I was the one overreacting. "You know what I owe you?" I said quietly. "Absolutely nothing. Not after this." Her jaw tightened. She crossed her arms over her chest, that familiar defensive stance she used during arguments over bills or when she forgot someone's birthday. "Okay, look," she said, "I didn't mean for this to happen. It just... spare me." I zipped the duffel bag halfway. "Don't you dare tell me it just happened. You don't fall into hotel beds by accident. You don't write love letters by mistake." She went quiet. I could hear Mabel's paws clicking softly on the hardwood in the hallway. She peeked her head in, tail low, sensing the tension. "I was lonely," Lynette said finally. "You've been so distant since retirement. You don't talk to me like you used to. You don't listen." "Don't do that," I cut in. "Don't stand there and rewrite our life just to make this fit into your narrative. I've been here. Every day. Fixing this house. Making dinner. Asking about your job. What else was I supposed to do, read your mind? Spy on your texts?" Her lip trembled. She looked down at the floor. I wondered if she was trying to cry or just hoping I'd stop talking. "I was going to tell you," she said quietly. "Eventually." "Yeah?" I walked past her, down the hall, toward the front door. "When? Before or after you packed your bags for San Diego one last time?" Silence. I opened the coat closet, pulled out my windbreaker and grabbed my truck keys from the hook. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That scared me, honestly. The calmness. The control. It felt like something dangerous had settled in me. Not rage. Not grief. Just clarity. "Where are you going?" she asked again. I finally looked her in the eyes. "Out," I said. "And when I come back, you won't be here." Her eyes widened. "Wait, what? You kicking me out?" I nodded once. "You can go to your sister's. Or your co-workers. Or hell, maybe he's got a spare bed in that fancy condo of his. But you're not sleeping under my roof tonight. You can't just..." "I can," I said, opening the door. "And I am." She stepped forward, reaching out like she thought she could stop me with a hand on my arm. But I pulled away. And then I left. I drove with no destination. Through the tree-lined streets of our neighborhood, past familiar mailboxes and porches I'd helped neighbors rebuild, past the old dog park where Mabel used to run until her hips gave out. Everything looked the same, but none of it felt the same. I ended up at a 24-hour diner off Route 36. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and faded photos of the original owners behind the register. I sat at the counter and ordered a black coffee. The waitress, mid-40s, tired eyes, a kindness to her voice, gave me a once-over like she'd seen men like me before. "Long day?" she asked. I nodded. "Something like that." She poured the coffee and slid over a bowl of sugar packets. I stared into the dark liquid for a long time. Around me, the place buzzed with late-night truckers and college kids with laptops. Life went on, even as mine collapsed in slow motion. I pulled out my phone. Notifications lit the screen, calls, texts. All from her. "Please come home. Can we talk? I'm sorry. I swear I didn't plan it. Please, Randall." Don't do this. But the last one froze me. I made a mistake. But he doesn't love me. Not really. That's when I realized she wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry it didn't work out. And right then, at that old diner counter, surrounded by the hum of strangers, I knew something with complete clarity. She wasn't coming back into my life. But I wasn't done with her yet. The coffee at that diner tasted like burnt wood. Didn't matter. I drank it anyway, cup after cup, until my hands started to jitter and my gut felt like it was coated in battery acid. The waitress stopped asking if I wanted a refill after the third. Just kept bringing them like she knew I wasn't there for the caffeine. I stayed until the sun started to rise. Pale light crept through the greasy windows, casting long shadows on the sticky linoleum floor. I checked my phone again. 9 missed calls. 11 texts. Nothing new. Just more apologies, more vague promises that she still loved me, that she was confused, that she needed to figure things out. That's what you say when you're still halfway out the door but don't want it to slam shut just yet. I drove home slow, taking the back roads along the ridge. Fog hung low over the farmland, like a blanket that didn't want to lift. My knuckles were white on the wheel, and for the first time in years, I noticed how old my hands looked. Veins rising, skin thin. Hands that built a life. Fixed leaky pipes. Held babies. Held her. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was gone. Good. The living room still smelled faintly of the roasted sweet potatoes she never finished. Her wine glass was still on the counter, lip print smudged near the rim. I stared at it for a long time before rinsing it out and dropping it in the dishwasher. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opened the closet. Half her stuff was still there. Jackets. Scarves. That cream-colored wool coat I bought her in Portland 2 winters ago. She looked beautiful in that coat. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it, trying to remember if she wore it when she left for her last trip. I couldn't. I grabbed a trash bag. One by one, I started pulling her clothes off the hangers. Not tearing. Not raging. Just quiet, methodical packing. I filled 3 bags before stopping. I didn't want to see her makeup drawer. I didn't want to smell the scent of her perfume bottles lined up like soldiers on the bathroom shelf. I needed a distraction. Something to remind me I was still in control. So I made a list. 1. Call the lawyer. 2. Change the locks. 3. Separate the bank accounts. 4. Freeze joint credit cards. 5. Contact an investigator. Yeah, that last one surprised me too. But I'd been thinking about it ever since I read her note. If she really had feelings for this guy, and was planning to leave me for him, I needed to know who he was. Not just a name or a phone number. I needed everything. Who he was. Where he worked. If he had a wife. Kids. If he'd done this before. This wasn't about jealousy anymore. This was war. I found a guy online. Former sheriff's deputy turned private eye. His website was plain, no fluff. Just a phone number and a guarantee. You want truth? I'll find it. I called. He answered on the 3rd ring. Voice like gravel, clipped and direct. You still taking clients? I asked. You still got a wallet, he replied. I gave him the basics, my wife's name, the phone number she'd been contacting, the travel schedule. I didn't give him my whole story. Not yet. Just enough. He said he could start within 48 hours. Said it might take a week or 2, depending on how much she was hiding. I wired half the payment up front. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen with my phone still in my hand, staring out the back window. The yard was soaked from the morning rain. Mabel stood near the garden, nose in the air, tail still. She was waiting. For what? I didn't know. I let her in, dried her paws with the old towel we kept by the door, and sat on the floor beside her. She rested her chin on my thigh. "Just you and me now," I said quietly. She looked up at me with those deep, amber eyes, and for a second, I felt the tears start to sting. But I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I made another list. What do I do when I find him? Do I confront him? Do I tell his wife, if he has one? Do I blow it all up, or do I wait and watch? That last part lingered. Wait and watch. I liked that idea more than I should have. I wasn't some idiot caught off guard. I had leverage now. I had knowledge. And once I had a name, a face, an address, I'd have something else. Options. The kind of options that could ruin a man if used right. And Lynette, she wouldn't see it coming. Not after all these years. Not from me. 3 days passed, and I didn't hear from her. Not a text. Not a call. Not a note on the porch. Just silence. The kind of silence that sinks into the walls and makes every floorboard creak like it's asking where she went. I'd catch myself still pouring 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Still checking the porch light before bed, even though I knew no one was coming home. But the weirdest part? I wasn't sad. I expected the grief to hit like a wave, to knock me flat. But it didn't. Instead, it came in cold, clinical pieces. Like my brain had decided to file her under former life and started clearing out space for whatever came next. I wasn't ready to call it healing. It felt more like planning. The private investigator, Dave, called me on a Thursday just after noon. I was in the garage rotating the tires on my truck when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. His voice was as dry as toast. "Got something?" I wiped my hands on an old rag. "Yeah. Your wife's boyfriend is named Andrew McMillan. Works for a solar tech firm in San Diego. VP of sales. Divorced. 2 kids in college. Rents a furnished condo near the beach. Drives a Tesla Model Y, black, license plate ends in 9K2. I leaned against the workbench. "How sure are you?" He chuckled. "Photos coming to your inbox in 5. When I opened the email, the first image hit harder than I expected. Lynette, standing outside a hotel entrance in San Diego, hair loose around her shoulders, laughing at something Andrew had just whispered. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with that slick corporate haircut and the kind of smile that screamed midlife crisis. His hand was on her lower back, too casual, too familiar. They looked like a couple on vacation. Like they didn't have a damn thing in the world to hide. Another photo showed them at a restaurant patio, wine glasses between them. She was holding his hand. Not just touching it, holding it. Fingers laced. I closed the laptop. I didn't get angry. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, took out a legal pad, and started writing. Not venting. Not journaling. Planning. Step by step. It wasn't about hurting them. Not yet. It was about shifting the balance of power. About no longer being the guy standing in the dark while 2 people laughed over stolen dinners and hotel sheets. I needed leverage. And that meant I needed to talk to someone who knew Andrew. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into Facebook. My account was dusty. Profile picture from 2013. Notifications stacked like unopened mail. I typed in Andrew's full name. Hit search. Bingo. There he was, Andrew McMillan. A little older looking than in Dave's photo, but it was him. Same jawline. Same smirk. His profile was half private, but there was just enough visible, a job at Sunnova, city listed as San Diego, public friends list. One of them was a woman named Claire McMillan. Same last name. Profile said family. Sister? I clicked. She lived in Orange County. Recently posted a photo of a backyard barbecue with the caption, "I love when Andy visits. Best big brother ever." Perfect. I scrolled until I found her email on an old charity donation page. She'd run a fundraiser for animal rescue a few months ago. Email was at the bottom. I copied it. Opened Gmail. Sat there staring at the blinking cursor for 10 full minutes. Then I wrote. Subject, is something you should know about your brother Andrew. I didn't go into detail. Just said he was in a relationship with a married woman and that I thought she deserved to know the truth. I attached 2 of Dave's photos. No threats. No drama. Just quiet, cold facts. Then I hit send. I stared at the screen for a moment, then leaned back in my chair. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was a warning shot. A crack in the shell. An hour later, I got a reply. Claire McMillan. Are you serious? Who are you? This can't be real. Please call me. I didn't. I let it sit. Let the idea stew in her mind. Let her start asking questions. And if she asked the right ones? If she started digging? Then Andrew's tidy little life, his career, his reputation, his weekend family barbecues, would start to wobble. That's all I wanted. To give them just enough rope. Let them hang themselves slowly. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. But I was going to burn every inch of their quiet little affair down to the studs. And I'd do it with a smile. I didn't hear from Claire again for 2 days. I figured she was doing exactly what I'd hoped, calling him, texting, demanding answers. Maybe she asked him who Randall was. Maybe she mentioned the photos. Maybe she just stayed quiet and watched him sweat. Whatever it was, I knew that silence wasn't a sign of nothing happening. It was the kind that comes right before a crack forms in the ice. Meanwhile, Lynette was still gone. I hadn't told her to pack up and leave permanently, but I didn't stop her either. She'd taken a few suitcases and a laptop bag, left her half-used shampoo in the shower, and never once asked if she could come back. That said enough. She texted twice. First just a generic "I hope you're okay." The second one came at 2:17 a.m. on a Sunday morning. "I can't sleep. I miss you." I didn't reply. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at those words on my screen, and felt nothing. Not anger. Not pain. Not hope. Just a cold, tired emptiness. The kind you get after the 10th hour of waiting in an ER with no updates. Your body's still there, but your heart already checked out. I got a call the next afternoon while I was out back cleaning out the shed. Dave again. Voice as dry as always. "You sitting down?" I leaned against the lawnmower. "Hit me." "Well," he said, "a guy Andrew has some cracks in his armor." He paused for effect. "Turns out he's not just seeing your wife. There's another woman." I blinked. "Come again?" "Goes by Melanie. Lives about 15 minutes from his place. He's been at her apartment twice this week. Different car each time." I took a slow breath. "And Lynette doesn't know?" "Highly doubt it. I'd bet money she thinks she's the only one he's sneaking around with." I laughed once, short, bitter. "Of course she does." Dave continued. "Want me to dig into the second woman?" "Not yet," I said. Let's focus on what we can use. I hung up and went inside, washed the dirt off my hands in the sink, and looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Tired. But sharp. I hadn't looked this clear-eyed in years. The next morning, I printed out the photos Dave had sent, the ones with Andrew and Lynette, plus the time-stamped images of him leaving Melanie's apartment with his tie undone. Then I mailed them. Not to Lynette. To Andrew's office. I found the address on the Sunnova website. Sent them in a plain envelope with no return address and a simple note, "It looks like your VP's been busy." Then I sent another envelope to Claire. Same photos. Different note, "I still think your brother's a good man?" It wasn't about shaming him. It was about exposing him. Creating fractures. Making it impossible for him to hide behind charm and corporate smiles. People like Andrew, men who think they are invincible, they depend on shadows. I was just flipping on the light. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. California area code. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it with a glass of whiskey in my hand. His voice was tight. Controlled. But there was an edge beneath it. "Randall, this is Andrew. I'm not sure what you think you're doing, but this needs to stop. You crossing a line. If you want to talk like adults, I'm happy to meet. But this isn't productive." He didn't sound confident. He sounded cornered. I played it again. Let his voice wash over me. Then I deleted it. That night, Lynette called. I was in the garage again, organizing tools, anything to keep my hands busy. I saw her name light up the screen and let it ring 5 times before answering. "Hello?" She exhaled, like she didn't expect me to pick up. "Randall. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Silence. "I am. I think we need to talk. In person." I didn't say anything. She hesitated. "He lied to me." "Andrew." "He said he was divorced, but he's seeing someone else. Another woman. I found out this morning." I bit back a grin. "So now it's a problem?" I asked. "That's not fair. Neither was cheating on your husband with a man who collects side pieces like keychains." She winced. I could hear it in the way she sucked in her breath. "I didn't know. I really thought that you were special." I cut in. "That you were the exception? You left your life for a guy who probably says the same lines to his barista." "I made a mistake," she said, voice trembling now. "A huge one. I was stupid. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't want this to be how it ends." I looked around the garage. At the shelves I built with my own hands. The bike I fixed up for our grandson. The toolbox she bought me on our 15th anniversary, still scratched from moving day. And I said, "Maybe you should have thought about how it would end before you started it." Then I hung up. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something real. Peace. I woke up the next morning before the sun, not because of any alarm, but because I'd finally slept. Deep, dreamless, and undisturbed. I didn't toss, didn't turn, didn't wake up sweating with her voice in my head. Just silence. And peace. For the first time in weeks, I made breakfast like I used to. Scrambled eggs, bacon, black coffee from my old drip machine that rattled when it started. The kitchen was still. The air smelled like pepper and toast and a little lemon from the dish soap I'd used the night before. No passive-aggressive sighs from the hallway. No phone lighting up with texts during coffee. No pretending. Just me, and the click of the burner, and Mabel curled up by the back door, tail gently thumping as I moved around. The calm didn't last long. Around 8:30, the doorbell rang. I knew it was her before I even looked through the blinds. Lynette stood on the porch wearing a navy blouse and jeans, her hair down, face bare. No makeup. No armor. Just her. She held a canvas tote bag I recognized, used to carry it to the farmer's market when we still went on Saturdays. I didn't open the door right away. I just watched her for a moment. She looked nervous. She shifted from foot to foot, like the porch was too hot to stand on. Finally, I opened the door halfway. She blinked at me, surprised. "You look good." I didn't respond. She swallowed. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside but said nothing. She walked in like she didn't know whether to touch anything. Like the place might bite her. She paused at the kitchen, the scent of breakfast still lingering. "You made eggs," she said softly, almost like she was remembering something good. I sat down at the table, arms crossed. She stayed standing. I didn't know where else to go," she said. "Claire won't talk to me. She blocked my number." "Andrew, well, you probably know already." I tilted my head. "That he's got a whole other woman stashed across town?" Her face crumpled just slightly, but she caught herself. "Yeah. That." She set the tote bag down on the counter. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I need to say a few things." I leaned back in the chair. She didn't sit. She paced instead, fingers fiddling with the hem of her sleeve. "I know I wrecked everything. I do. I didn't just cheat, I lied, over and over. I justified it in my head, convinced myself it was something I deserved, or needed. But it wasn't. It was just selfish. I was selfish." She looked up at me, eyes red. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a second chance. I just want you to know, none of it was about you. You were always good to me, Randall. Always." I stared at her. Then why wasn't that enough? Her mouth opened, then closed. She shook her head. "I don't know. I think I just stopped seeing what I had. I got caught up in feeling wanted again. Like I mattered to someone. And I didn't realize I already had that, right here, every single day." I nodded slowly. "That's the thing about feeling wanted, Lynette. It's not supposed to be a high. It's supposed to be home." She sank into the nearest chair like her legs gave out. Her shoulders slumped, and she rubbed her hands together like she was cold. "I'm staying with Marla now," she said. "I brought some of your things. The photo albums. I thought maybe you'd want them, in case." "In case what?" "In case this is really the end." We sat in silence for a long moment. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. I looked at her. Really looked. This was the woman I'd shared a life with. Not perfect, not a monster. Just broken in a way I didn't see coming. But I wasn't going to fix her. That job was never mine to begin with. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "Not like I was." She looked up, hopeful. "Then maybe. But that doesn't mean I want this again." Her face froze. "I can't trust you, Lynette. And without trust, there's no us. I don't hate you. I don't even want revenge anymore. I just want to move on without dragging your mess behind me." Tears slid silently down her cheeks. "I'll be filing soon," I said. "I wanted to tell you that in person." She nodded, wiped her face. "I deserve that." I stood and walked to the door. Opened it for her. She walked out without looking back. I stood there a moment, watching her get into her car, clutching the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing she had left. Then I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. It didn't feel like the end of a marriage. It felt like the beginning of something better. The house felt different after she left that morning. Not quieter, it had already been quiet for weeks. But the energy shifted. Like something heavy had been dragged out through the front door, and the walls finally exhaled. Even Mabel noticed. She lay by the window with her chin on her paws, ears twitching, eyes tracking nothing in particular. She didn't bark when Lynette pulled away. Didn't move. Just watched the space she used to occupy. I went to the hallway closet and pulled out the photo albums she'd brought back. There were 4 of them. Leatherbound, the kind we used to buy from that little stationery store in Bend. She'd always liked labeling things: summer 1997, Wyoming trip, Cameron's graduation. Her handwriting on those labels was round, neat, oddly calming. I set them on the dining table and flipped open the first one. There we were, younger, leaner, smiling under a picnic umbrella somewhere near Crater Lake. I had a full head of hair back then. She had a blue scarf tied around her ponytail and a freckle just under her lip that she used to hate. She called it a dot of bad luck. I used to kiss it anyway. Page after page, I saw us. Birthday parties, camping trips, snow angels in the front yard. The first apartment, the first house, the backyard we built together. All frozen in glossy stills. And then somewhere, around the 3rd album, I noticed something strange. The smiles changed. Not all at once, but gradually. I started to see her turned away from the camera more often. Her smiles became thinner, tighter. Less joy, more obligation. Like she was still playing the part, but her heart had already started stepping off stage. I sat there for a long time, flipping pages, staring, wondering when exactly it happened. When did we stop being we? Was it after the kids moved out? After my retirement? Or was it even earlier, hiding between the moments we thought were safe? I wanted to tear the albums apart. Toss them in the fire pit out back, burn the history she'd rewritten behind my back. But I didn't. Instead, I stacked them neatly and slid them into the bottom drawer of my office desk. Not because I wanted to revisit them, but because erasing the past felt too easy. And too cowardly. I wasn't running from this. Not anymore. That afternoon, I went down to the local locksmith and had the house rekeyed. The guy behind the counter, maybe 30, long beard, wore a shirt that said, "Don't touch my tools unless you're naked," didn't ask many questions. He just nodded when I handed him the specs and said he'd have a guy out by morning. I paid in cash. Afterward, I stopped by the post office and submitted a change of address form for a P.O. box. I didn't need Lynette's mail showing up here. I didn't want reminders. I didn't want apologies scrawled on the backs of birthday cards or letters addressed to my husband, "If you'll still have me." That chapter was closed. I came home, microwaved leftover chicken stir-fry, and ate it straight from the container at the counter. No plates. No music. Just the ticking of the kitchen clock. I hadn't told the kids yet. Cameron had called last week to ask about Mabel's arthritis. Said he was thinking of flying in to visit, maybe bringing the girls. I told him not to rush, that things were complicated at home. I didn't want to dump the truth on him over the phone. Not yet. He always loved his mom. They had that bond one never wanted to break. But I knew I'd have to tell him soon. I stared at my phone for a long time, thumb hovering over his name in my contacts. Then I put it down. That night, just before bed, I went out to the garage and pulled down a box from the top shelf. Inside were all the letters Lynette and I wrote each other before we were married. We used to exchange notes every Sunday, even when we lived in the same city. Just something sweet, personal. Promises for the future. Jokes. sketches. I even drew a cartoon version of our wedding once, her in a cape, me in a top hat, riding a turtle toward the sunset. I sat on the cold floor, reading every one. Some made me smile. Some made my chest tighten like a vice. She'd written once, "I know we'll grow old together and laugh at how scared we were in the beginning. That's what I want. Just us, steady, unshakable." I folded the letter carefully and put it back. We were steady. Until we weren't. The next morning, I woke early and poured the first cup of coffee into a clean mug, a plain white one, no slogans, no logos. The sun was just creeping over the fence, casting long golden bars through the kitchen blinds. And I stood there, alone, barefoot on the tile, with my dog at my side and no messages waiting on my phone. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could finally breathe. The war wasn't over. But the fog was lifting. The sun that morning came in bright and sharp. That kind of late spring light that cuts through the blinds and draws lines across the floor like a warning, you better be ready for what's next. I made my coffee the same way I always do, 1 scoop too strong, splash of half and half, no sugar. Mabel sat at my feet, waiting for a piece of toast that never came. I'd run out of bread the day before and forgotten to go to the store. My appetite had come and gone so often lately that grocery shopping felt like a waste of time. I stood there, sipping, watching the dust float through the sunlight, and realized I hadn't cried. Not once. Not when I read her messages. Not when I saw the photos. Not even when she stood in front of me, begging for a conversation like it was something I owed her. Was something wrong with me? Or maybe after a certain age, pain just settles differently. It doesn't explode. It seeps. It embeds itself in the corners of your house. In the old shirts you don't wear anymore. In the half-empty toothpaste tube sitting beside yours. In the tiny rust stain under the soap dish that she always meant to scrub, but never did. It becomes part of the architecture. I went out that morning to take care of the locks. The guy showed up in a white van, ball cap pulled low, clipboard in hand. He was quick, polite, efficient. Didn't ask questions. Didn't blink when I said, "Make sure none of the old keys work." Not even the garage. By 11 a.m., I had fresh locks on every entry point. There was a sense of finality in it. Like the last click of a vault closing. After he left, I opened the mailbox and found something waiting, a small padded envelope with no return address. My name, handwritten in thick black ink. Inside was a note. "I know it won't matter, but I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, for how I made you doubt everything. You didn't deserve that. You never did." It wasn't signed. But I knew her handwriting. I knew every curve of those letters. Every loop in her why. She hadn't even put it in her own envelope. Just mailed it anonymously, like a coward hiding behind her own guilt. I crumpled it. Didn't throw it away. Just crumpled it and shoved it in the junk drawer, where half-used batteries and expired coupons went to die. That afternoon, I finally called Cameron. He answered on the third ring, out of breath. "Hey Dad, what's up? Got a minute?" "Yeah, just finishing a run." "What's going on?" I didn't ease into it. I didn't sugarcoat. I told him what happened. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he exhaled. "Jesus. Yeah. I don't even know what to say. Are you okay?" "I'm working on it. Do you want me to come out there?" "I can fly in Friday." "You don't have to." "But I can." "I know." We sat in silence for another few seconds. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. "What about Mom? What about her? What happens next?" I stared out the kitchen window at the lawn I hadn't mowed in a week. The grass was too long. It looked wild, unruly. Kind of like me. She's not coming back here. Not ever. He cleared his throat. Does Addie know? Not yet. I'll call her tonight. He was quiet again, and then he said something that stuck with me. You know, you always seemed like the strong one, Dad. But now I get it. You were just the one carrying the most weight. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. We said goodbye not long after. Promised to talk soon. I hung up and stood there for a while, looking out at that wild patch of grass. I thought about mowing it. About doing something normal. Something routine. But I didn't. Instead, I went upstairs and opened the hallway closet, the one with all the things we never use. Board games. Old sweaters. A sewing kit from her grandmother. I pulled out the suitcase I'd seen her take on her first trip to San Diego. It was navy blue. Scuffed on one corner. Tag still attached. I unzipped it. Inside was nothing. Just a faint trace of perfume. That scent used to comfort me. Reminded me of Sunday mornings and her robe brushing against my arm when she leaned over to pour coffee. Now it made my stomach turn. I zipped it shut again. Carried it to the garage. Set it beside the trash cans. It wasn't about spite. It was about removing pieces of a puzzle that no longer belonged on my table. That night, I sat outside on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and a bourbon sweating in my hand. Mabel lay at my feet, ears twitching, half asleep. Above us, the stars came out. No noise. No calls. No regrets I hadn't already dissected. Just stillness. And in that stillness, a small, unfamiliar feeling began to bloom. Something like freedom. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. Not that I'd set one, force of habit, I guess. It was still dark out, that quiet part of the day when even the birds haven't decided if it's worth singing yet. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow, listening to the hum of the fridge downstairs and the occasional creak from the house settling into its bones. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and sat for a minute. My knees ached, they always do in the morning now, but I welcomed the discomfort. It reminded me I was still here. Still moving. The house was cold. I threw on a hoodie and padded downstairs in socks, passing the hallway where her framed diploma used to hang. I'd taken it down a few days ago and stuck it in the attic. Didn't know why. Just didn't want to see her name on my walls anymore. I started the coffee, same as always. Mabel stretched from her spot by the back door, gave me a look like, well, are we doing this or what? I led her out into the yard. The grass was wet with dew, and the sun had just started teasing the edges of the sky. As I watched her sniff around the perimeter like some old sentinel on patrol, I thought about how different my life had become in such a short time. Not worse. Not better. Just different. Like someone had rearranged all the furniture in my head while I was asleep. Around 9 a.m., I got a call from Dave. He never wasted time on small talk. You gonna want to hear this, he said. Turns out your boy Andrew's not just sloppy, he's reckless. I leaned against the counter, coffee mug in hand. Go on. Guy's been using a company card to fund some of these hotel visits. Same hotel, same woman, not just your wife. Melanie. The one we spotted earlier. My chest tightened, but I didn't interrupt. Better yet, Dave continued, I pulled some surveillance footage. Got him kissing Melanie in the lobby. Broad daylight. Different day, different trip. I spoke to someone at the front desk, off the record. They've been flagged for frequent stay anomalies. That's corporate speak for you screwing around on company time, and we've noticed. I set the mug down slowly. So they're watching him now? Oh, they've got more than eyes on him. I'd bet he's one expense report away from being walked out with a cardboard box. I exhaled. Good. You want me to send the footage? No, I said. I don't need to see it. I just needed to know it exists. We hung up. And for the first time since all this started, I realized something important. I didn't care about Andrew anymore. He wasn't a threat. Wasn't the villain I'd built up in my head. He was just a dumb, predictable man who thought rules didn't apply to him. And now the rules were catching up. Let him burn. Later that day, I drove to the hardware store, not for anything big. Just some mulch and a few wooden stakes to finish the garden bed I'd been ignoring. I nodded to Greg at the register. We used to coach Little League together, though neither of us had spoken much since our boys went to college. He glanced at the items on the counter. Big plans this weekend? Something like that. Well, you got the weather for it, he said. Finally. I smiled. Yeah. Finally. Back home, I spent the afternoon in the dirt. Gloves on, sleeves rolled, sweat stinging my eyes. There's something primal about digging, something that pulls you out of your head and back into your body. Every shovel of soil felt like a decision. Every planted stake, a boundary reclaimed. By sundown, the bed was done. Clean edges. Fresh soil. Ready for whatever I decided to grow. I sat on the back steps with a cold root beer, watching the sky turn orange, then gold, then the soft purple of closing day. That's when I heard the text come in. It was from her. Lynette, I heard Andrew lost his job. He blames you. I stared at the message. Not with panic. Not even with satisfaction. Just curiosity. Then another one came. Lynette, I don't know why I'm even texting. I just don't know who I am anymore. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. She had built her story on borrowed hours and fragile lies. And now that it was collapsing, she was looking for someone to hand her a blueprint. But I wasn't a builder anymore. I was something else now. Something harder. Sharper. And far more dangerous with silence than I ever was with words. I turned off my phone, walked inside, and locked the door behind me. Let the ghosts text each other. I had work to do. I didn't sleep that night, but not because I was anxious. It was something else. My body was still. My eyes were shut. But my mind was sifting through the wreckage like a slow, steady tide, pulling pieces of my old life out of the sand and deciding what was worth keeping. I never responded to Lynette's texts. I didn't block her, though. That would have been too easy. And frankly, too generous. Let her sit with the unread message bubbles. Let her wonder which one did it, which decision was the one that finally snapped the thread for good. That kind of silence can drive a person mad. By mid-morning, I was standing in the middle of my living room holding a roll of painter's tape and a gallon of antique birch eggshell finish I'd picked up on a whim the day before. The walls hadn't been painted in over a decade. Lynette always said she liked the faded sage green, said it reminded her of eucalyptus leaves. But every time I looked at it now, I thought of hotel lobbies and conference calls that weren't real. So I painted. Slow, methodical strokes. The kind of work that fills your hands and empties your head. I opened the windows wide, let the spring breeze carry the scent of fresh paint and something sweeter from the trees out back, maybe lilac or apple blossom. By the time I was done, the walls looked brighter. Cleaner. Like they belonged to someone new. I made a sandwich, turkey on rye, heavy mustard, dill pickle on the side, and sat on the back steps watching Mabel nose around the yard. Her coat was duller than it used to be, and her back legs sometimes wobbled when she stood up too fast, but she still had the soul of a soldier. She came over and leaned into my knee like she always did, head tilted, asking the question without words. What now? That was the thing. For the first time, I didn't have a plan. The fire had burned hot and hard for weeks, fueled by betrayal and rage and some primal need to regain control. But now that the smoke had cleared, I was standing in the ashes with nothing left to destroy. I'd already called the lawyer. The papers were drafted. A few signatures and the marriage that had outlived empires would be officially over. I didn't flinch when I saw the word petition next to my name. Didn't mourn. The grief had already passed. Quiet and ugly. It came and went like a fever. Now there was just clarity. I cleaned the garage next. Threw out boxes of Christmas lights we hadn't used in years, rusted garden tools, an old George Foreman grill still in its box. I found one of Lynette's scarves tucked in the back corner, beige and soft, probably cashmere. It still had her perfume on it. I didn't hesitate. I dropped it into the trash bag with the rest. That night, I finally called Addison. She answered on the first ring. Dad? Hey, sweetheart. Oh my God, are you okay? Cameron called. He said you told him what happened, but he didn't say much, just that you were handling it. What the hell does that even mean? I took a breath. It means I'm moving on. Is it true? She asked. Did Mom really? Yeah. It's true. There was silence on her end. Then, softly, Jesus. I didn't want to tell you like this. I just needed to wait until I wasn't angry. Are you still? No, I said. Not angry. Just done. She sniffed. God, I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine. You guys were like, hell, you were the example. You made it through everything. Until we didn't. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I said. I just needed you to know it wasn't your fault. Or your brother's. Or mine, really. Some people just quit. There was another pause. Can I come visit? Of course. Can I bring Sam? Of course. I love you, Dad. I felt the knot in my chest loosen, just a little. I love you too. After we hung up, I sat on the porch again, this time with a blanket and a small notebook in my lap. I started writing. Not a journal. Not a letter. Just thoughts. Things I hadn't said out loud. Regrets I didn't want to carry. Lessons I didn't want to forget. I wrote until the stars came out. And then I went inside, turned out the lights, and slept, not like a man who had lost something, but like a man who had survived it. The thing about surviving is that no one tells you how quiet it gets afterward. You go through the fire, endure the betrayal, the confrontation, the unraveling, and then, nothing. Just your own breath in an empty room, your own footsteps echoing on hardwood floors that once muffled two sets. The silence doesn't roar. It just settles. That morning, I found myself scrubbing the kitchen floor. Not because it needed it, I'd mopped last week. But because I needed the rhythm. The physicality. Something about dragging that soapy sponge across tile, rinsing it out, squeezing it dry, repeating, it gave shape to the shapelessness I'd been drifting through. There was a ring of dried tea under where she used to set her mug. I must have walked past it 100 times, but today it stared up at me like a bruise. I scrubbed until my knuckles went red, until the tile looked new. When I stood up, my knees popped so loud I laughed. That sound, my own laughter, startled me. It had been so long since it came naturally, not out of sarcasm or bitterness, but just relief. The absurdity of being 62, alone in your kitchen, fighting with a memory stain and winning. I made myself an omelette. Cheese, mushrooms, A little ham. I plated it like I used to when we had guests, neat, with a sprig of parsley I cut from the window box. I sat at the table and ate slowly, with music playing softly in the background. No phone nearby. No news. No distractions. That's when I realized I was rebuilding my life, not replacing it. Later, I went to the library downtown. I hadn't been there in years, not since they remodeled and added the glass atrium. I used to go with Lynette, back when we were young, before the kids, when we'd spend entire Sundays reading in silence. She always drifted toward fiction. I liked history. Biographies. Real things. I walked through the aisles without a list. Just let my hand trail along the spines until one felt right. It was a weathered hardcover, The Art of Stillness by Pico Iyer. Seemed fitting. At the checkout, the librarian, a tall man with wireframe glasses and a faded Portland Trail Blazers hoodie, smiled and said, "Good choice. That one saved me during my divorce." I raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. Sometimes silence is the best medicine. I nodded. Yeah. I'm starting to believe that. When I got home, there was a package on the porch. No label. No return address. Inside was a framed photo. One of ours. I knew it immediately, from a trip to Jasper National Park back in 2004. We'd hiked for hours. Found a hidden lake that wasn't even on the maps. Someone had snapped the picture of us from a distance, probably another hiker. She was laughing, arms outstretched, and I had just picked up a handful of snow to throw at her. It was candid. Pure. Underneath the photo was a sticky note. I never deserved that day. I'm sorry. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I took the photo out of the frame, placed it in a box labeled Past, and slid it under the guest bed. Not out of spite. Just closure. That night, I sat on the back porch with a beer in hand and the book in my lap. Mabel dozed beside me, snoring faintly, twitching in her sleep like she was chasing rabbits again. The sky was painted in layers, orange near the horizon, fading to purple, then black at the edges where the stars started to prick through. The neighborhood was still. No traffic. No music. Just the soft rustle of leaves. I opened the book and read. In an age of speed, nothing can be more invigorating than going slow. In an age of distraction, nothing is so luxurious as paying attention. I read it again. Slower. I looked out at the yard. At the new garden bed. At the bare spot where the birdbath used to be, a project I'd started with Lynette one summer and never finished. I thought about rebuilding it. Not because I wanted to preserve anything of us, but because the space deserved something better than a hole. So did I. Just before going inside, I checked my phone. One missed call. Unknown number. No voicemail. I didn't call back. If it was her, she'd learned by now that silence speaks louder than any apology. And if it wasn't, well, I'd stopped answering to ghosts. Tomorrow, I'd pick up new lumber. Maybe stain it a different color. Maybe make it mine this time. No shared vision. No compromise. Just wood, tools, and a man finally learning to build something that wouldn't break beneath someone else's weight. Saturday came with clear skies and a cool breeze. The kind of morning that practically begs you to do something with your hands. I was up by 6, dressed in an old grey flannel, jeans worn thin at the knees, and boots I hadn't laced up in a year. The house smelled like fresh coffee and sawdust, one of those strange combinations that felt, somehow, like progress. I had a plan, rebuild the birdbath. It wasn't much of a monument, just a round basin set on a wooden post. The original had cracked last winter, split clean down the middle after a freeze I hadn't seen coming. For months, I let the broken stump sit there like a reminder of all the things we said we'd get to eventually. Now, eventually belonged to me alone. I loaded the truck with supplies, pressure-treated wood, concrete mix, a new ceramic bowl I found at a garden outlet on sale. Mabel rode shotgun, her head out the window, ears flapping in the wind like a flag at half-mast. She was 13 now. Slower. Stiffer. But still alert. Still loyal. We got back before 8. I opened the garage, pulled out the sawhorses, and started cutting. The blade sliced through the wood with a shrill whine, sharp and satisfying. Each plank, each notch, each drilled hole, all of it brought me further from what was and closer to what could be. I worked until noon. Sweat soaked through my shirt. My back ached. But the new post stood firm in the dirt, bolted deep, stable as a tree trunk. I stood over it with the bowl in my hands, not yet mounted, and just stared. For some reason, I thought about the first time I saw Lynette cry. It wasn't anything dramatic. We were in our second apartment, still broke, still figuring each other out. She'd burned dinner, chicken and rice, and the fire alarm had gone off. The smoke was awful, the rice scorched black at the bottom of the pan. She dropped everything, sat on the linoleum, and started sobbing. I just wanted us to have something nice tonight, she'd said. So I'd gone out, got us greasy burgers from a diner down the street, and we ate them on the fire escape with paper napkins and chocolate milkshakes. She laughed through her tears and said it was better than any fancy meal. That moment had lived in my chest for decades. Now I wasn't sure if it was even real. Was she always that woman? Or was that just a version she wore for me? I installed the basin carefully, made sure it was level. I poured fresh water into it, clear and cold. It shimmered in the sun. Birds would come soon enough. Back inside, I showered and shaved. Took the time to do it right, hot towel, fresh blade, even the aftershave I used to wear before I stopped caring. I trimmed the edges of my beard, looked in the mirror, and saw someone I recognized. Not the version Lynette abandoned. The one she underestimated. I put on a clean button-down, tucked it in, and drove into town. I needed groceries, sure, but also I needed to be around people. Real people. Not memories. Not texts. Not lawyers. I parked at the co-op market, the one Lynette always said was too expensive. I grabbed a basket and wandered the aisle slowly. The produce was fresher. The staff friendlier. I picked up tomatoes, sourdough, sharp white cheddar, a bag of fair trade coffee beans. I even let the guy at the counter talk me into a jar of local honey. "You look like someone who appreciates quality," he said. I nodded, trying to get back to it. As I walked out, I saw a familiar face, Judy Fletcher, from down the street. Widow, early 70s, ran the neighborhood book club for years. She squinted at me, then smiled. "Randall?" "Judy." "Hey." She stepped closer. "You look good. Healthier. Brighter." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She touched my arm lightly. "I mean it. You've got that post-storm glow." I laughed. "Let's hope the worst of the weather's past." "Sometimes," she said, "it's what comes after the storm that teaches us the most." We chatted for a bit, about gardening, her knee replacement, her grandson's wedding. She mentioned she was restarting the book club next month. "You should come," she said. "We are reading Steinbeck again." "I might." She smiled again, and this time it wasn't polite. It was warm. "Good," she said. "It's nice to see you upright again." When I got home, the birdbath already had visitors, 2 sparrows, dipping and fluttering. I watched from the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a fresh cup of coffee, the smell of honey and roasted beans filling the room. I didn't text Lynette back. Didn't check her social media. Didn't wonder where she was sleeping, or who she was blaming. Instead, I opened the book I got from the library. And I read the first line out loud to no one but Mabel and the birds. To lose is human. To rebuild? That's where the power is. And I believed it. Sunday mornings used to be sacred in our house. Back when the kids were still around, it was pancakes and cartoons. Later, when it was just the two of us, it became slow coffee, crossword puzzles, and the low hum of NPR coming through the old kitchen radio. Even after everything, even as things began to rot from the inside, we kept the ritual alive longer than we should have, out of habit, or fear, or maybe just because starting over felt harder than staying quiet. Now, Sunday morning belongs to me. And it was quiet. Beautifully so. I took my coffee out onto the porch. The air was crisp, and the sun peeked through the trees just enough to warm the deck. Mabel lay beside my chair, sighing deeply like she, too, was finally beginning to understand peace. I had no plans for the day, and that felt like a luxury. Until my phone rang. It was Cameron. Hey, Dad. You free? For you? Always. I'm 10 minutes out. I sat up straighter. Wait, 10 minutes from where? Your driveway. I laughed. You could have warned me. Then it wouldn't be a surprise. True to his word, a dusty black SUV rolled up the street not long after. He stepped out in jeans and a plain grey t-shirt, looking more like his grandfather than I expected. Strong shoulders, tired eyes. He gave me one of those half hugs, the kind men give when they're not sure how to navigate tenderness. Hey, old man. Hey yourself. Inside, we made fresh coffee. I pulled out the cinnamon rolls I'd picked up the day before, just in case. We sat at the table in the new light of the repainted kitchen, the antique birch walls still carrying that faint new paint smell. It was the first time he'd seen it since the split. Place looks different, he said, looking around. Feels different too. He nodded. Good. We ate in silence for a while. Not awkward, just the quiet kind that only exists between people who've been through enough together that they don't have to fill every gap with noise. Eventually, he said, So, how are you, really? I looked at him. You want the real answer, or the polite one? He raised an eyebrow. Come on, Dad. You raised me better than that. I exhaled. I'm okay. Better than okay, some days. Still angry sometimes, still confused. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm waking up in the morning and wanting to do things. Build things. That's progress, I think. He nodded again. I was worried. You didn't sound like yourself the first few times we talked. I wasn't. He looked down at his coffee. I talked to Mom. I froze just for a second. When? Last week. She called me. Said she was thinking about coming up here. Wanted to see if there's still a path back. Her words. I leaned back in my chair. And what did you say? I asked her what she'd be coming back to. That landed like a weight between us. He continued. She said she missed the life. The rhythm. Said she was lonely. I scoffed. Well, she chose loneliness over honesty. He looked pained. I know. I'm not defending her. I wanted you to know in case she shows up. I changed the locks. He smiled sadly. I figured you would. We talked for hours, about nothing, about everything. He helped me fix a loose porch step, offered to repaint the mailbox. We didn't say it, but we both knew what this visit really was, our wellness check. A son making sure his father hadn't disappeared under the weight of betrayal. Before he left, he handed me a small package. "Addie sent this. She said it belonged to you more than to her." Inside was a framed photo, me and the kids at a fishing lake somewhere near Hood River, maybe 15 years ago. I had a sunburn. Cameron's hair was bleached from the sun. Addie was holding a trout like it was a newborn. Lynette wasn't in the photo. I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed it on the bookshelf beside my armchair. After he drove away, I sat back on the porch, the sun dipping low now, casting long shadows across the yard. The birdbath shimmered. A robin landed briefly, took a sip, then flew off. I didn't feel sad. Not anymore. Because this quiet, this stillness, this clear-eyed solitude, was mine. And it wasn't empty. It was honest. And it was finally enough. The days after Cameron's visit moved slower. Not in a dull or painful way, more like the kind of slow that lets you hear things you hadn't noticed before. Birds outside the window. The creak in the pantry door. The faint hum of the fridge cycling on. Silence, when it's not filled with dread, becomes its own kind of music. I found myself leaning into that rhythm. I'd get up early, same as always. Brew coffee. Let Mabel out. Sit on the back steps with a flannel wrapped around my shoulders and just watch. Watch the trees sway. Watch the light change on the garden bed. Watch my hands holding the same mug I've used since 2001, the one with the faded Yellowstone logo and a chipped lip I never bothered fixing. Every part of the house felt like a ghost town that had started inviting people back in. Not actual people. Just me. But it was enough. Midweek, I drove into town to return the library book. I wasn't even finished with it, not really, but I didn't need to be. I'd already underlined the only line that mattered: a stillness is not the absence of movement, but the presence of self. I dropped the book in the return slot and walked 2 blocks to Miller's Cafe, a place Lynette never liked. Said the coffee was too bitter and the booths too sticky. But that morning, it felt perfect. I slid into a booth near the window. Ordered black coffee and a slice of their banana bread, still warm from the oven. The waitress, Maria, if I remembered right, smiled at me like I wasn't just another customer. "Good to see you back in," she said. "You remember me?" "Course I do. You used to come with your wife. Long time ago." I nodded, sipped my coffee. It was strong. Too strong. Perfect. "She not with you today?" I paused. "No. Not anymore." Maria's face didn't flinch. Just nodded, quiet. "Happens." Then she left me alone. That's the kind of grace you don't get from people who haven't seen pain up close. Back home, I spent the afternoon organizing the attic. It had become a collection of the forgotten, board games missing pieces, old computer monitors, dusty Tupperware bins full of Christmas lights and tangled extension cords. I found a box labeled "Memories, Do Not Open." Lynette's handwriting. Naturally, I opened it. Inside were things I hadn't seen in decades. Concert stubs. A pressed flower from our first hike in Olympic National Park. Receipts from our honeymoon motel in Reno. A dried-out pen with Randall plus Lynette forever scratched into the barrel. It should have gutted me. But it didn't. I sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, flipping through the pieces of our history, and felt something I hadn't expected: a gratitude. Not for what happened, but for what I'd survived. Some people never see betrayal coming. Some let it break them. I'd seen it. Taken it head-on. Felt every shard. And I was still here. Still breathing. Still standing. I resealed the box and labeled it again, this time with my handwriting. Closed chapter. I didn't throw it away. I didn't need to erase the past to move forward. I just needed to stop carrying it like it still belonged to me. That night, I grilled a steak. Medium rare. Just how I like it. Made a baked potato and some green beans sautéed with garlic. Poured a glass of red wine I'd been saving for no particular reason. I sat at the dining table, just one place setting, and ate like a man who hadn't forgotten how. Halfway through the meal, the phone buzzed. Unknown number again. This time, I let it go to voicemail without even flinching. I finished my meal. Washed the dishes. Poured the rest of the wine into a tumbler and sat on the porch. Only then did I listen to the message. It was Lynette. Her voice was soft. Strained. Randall. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. I got a job in Arizona. I'm leaving at the end of the month. I won't be around anymore. I figured you'd want to hear it from me, not someone else. She paused. Then, you were always better than I deserved. I hope you find whatever comes next. Click. I stared at the trees swaying in the wind, at the stars peeking through the dark, and felt free. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just free. And that? That was worth more than any apology. After Lynette's voicemail, I didn't feel the urge to call her back. There was nothing left to untangle. No hidden meanings in her voice. No coded regret. Just words floating in the air, drifting further and further from the life we once shared. She was leaving the state. And somehow, that simple fact settled over me like a soft rain after a long, dry season. The next morning, I went to the barbershop. I hadn't been in months. My beard was uneven, my neck looked wild, and the mirror had started giving me side-eye every time I walked past it. The place I went to, Leo's Cuts, had been around since the 80s. Same cracked leather chairs, same sports radio playing too loud in the background, same faded posters of hairstyles nobody asked for anymore. Leo was still there, though he moved slower these days. Long time, Randall, he said, brushing off the chair. What brings you in? Figured it was time to stop looking like a man who lost a fight with a raccoon. He chuckled, motioned for me to sit. That bad, hey? I sat down, draped in a cape that smelled like eucalyptus and old aftershave. Worse. He didn't press. Leo had a gift, he knew how to be quiet without making the silence feel awkward. He trimmed, buzzed, shaped, and smoothed with that kind of care only an old-school barber has. No rush. No upsell. Just work. Halfway through the cut, he said, "You look lighter." I raised an eyebrow. You mean my hair? No. You. I stared at my reflection for a moment. He was right. Something in my eyes had changed. Less weight behind them. Less bracing for the next blow. When I left, the wind felt cooler on my face. The world didn't look brighter, just clearer. I stopped at the bookstore on the way home. A little independent shop with dusty shelves and handwritten staff recommendations. The kind of place that smells like paper and possibility. I wandered without a purpose, like a man waiting to be surprised. In the back, I found a copy of Travels with Charlie by Steinbeck. The cover was worn, pages dog-eared. Someone had written beautiful truths on the inside cover. I took that as a sign. At checkout, the young woman behind the counter smiled. That's one of my favorites. I nodded. Mine now too. Back home, I opened the windows, let the late afternoon light stretch across the floorboards. I brewed a cup of tea for once instead of coffee. Earl Grey. Lynette always hated it. Said it smelled like perfume. I sipped it slow and read the first few pages of the book. Steinbeck talked about the road, about solitude, about the strange magic of leaving and the deeper magic of returning. I underlined a line I couldn't stop thinking about: a journey is like marriage. The certain way to be wrong is to think you control it. I set the book down and stared at the backyard, at the birdbath now full of visitors. Sparrows, robins, even a brave blue jay that bullied the rest for space. Everything in nature moves forward, I thought. No rewinds. No replays. Just the next day, the next breath, the next bloom. That evening, I grilled again. Salmon, lemon dill, asparagus with sea salt, and a cold IPA from the brewery 2 towns over. I ate outside, played on my lap, Mabel lying close enough to steal a bite if I looked away too long. She didn't. When I finished, I pulled out a pen and my notebook. The one I started after Lynette moved out. Not a diary. Just a record. A mirror. And I wrote, "She's leaving," and I didn't flinch. Maybe that's what healing feels like, not triumph, but stillness. Not a clean slate, but a map of all the places I've already survived. I paused. Then wrote, "There's a kind of beauty in the fact that I'm not waiting anymore. Not for her. Not for apologies. Not even for understanding. I am where I am. And that's enough." Mabel sighed in her sleep, tail flicking once like punctuation. I looked up at the sky, clear, wide, deep, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought about where I'd go next. It hit me the next morning, somewhere between feeding Mabel and folding laundry, this feeling I couldn't quite name. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It wasn't peace either. But it felt real. Tangible. Like waking up from a bad dream and realizing you're already halfway through a good day without noticing. There was no single moment that caused it. Just the accumulation of small things, the silence that no longer stung, the ache in my chest that had slowly gone dull, the fact that I hadn't thought about Lynette once before noon. I opened the windows again. Spring was slipping into early summer, and the breeze carried that dry warmth that always reminded me of the last day of school as a kid, that sense of possibility. I found myself rearranging the living room. It wasn't something I planned. One minute I was dusting the bookshelf, and the next I was dragging the couch across the hardwood floor, relining the rug, shifting the recliner to where Lynette's favorite chair used to be. That chair had been donated weeks ago, but I realized I'd left its space untouched, like some ghost still deserved a throne. Not anymore. I brought down an old print I'd kept in the attic, a black and white photo of a forest path, taken by a friend who died young. I hung it above the new chair. It looked right. Clean. Honest. Around noon, I went out for a walk. I used to walk with her sometimes, Sunday afternoons, after brunch. She always insisted on the same route, through Lincoln Park, down Sycamore Lane, past that bakery that made croissants that were somehow always sold out. I took a different path this time. Wandered down streets I hadn't visited in years. Past houses I'd watched go up when the neighborhood first started expanding. A few had for sale signs. A few were abandoned, windows dark. I passed a small house with a handmade sign out front that said, "Fresh eggs, $5 per dozen." I bought a dozen. The woman who sold them looked maybe 60, weathered and bright-eyed. Her hands were strong. She wore an apron that said, "Hen Whisperer." "City man?" she asked, handing me the carton. "Not lately." She grinned. "Good. The city's too fast for healing, anyway." I didn't ask how she knew. I just nodded. Back home, I scrambled some of those eggs for lunch. The yolks were deeper, orange instead of yellow. They tasted earthy, richer than anything I'd bought in a store. I added a slice of toast, slathered with butter and a little of that local honey from the co-op. It was simple. And perfect. Later, I went through my closet. Another unplanned task. Just stood there after grabbing a sweater and thought, half of this isn't me anymore. I pulled shirts from hangers, the ones Lynette liked, the ones I wore to make her smile, the ones that didn't fit right but stayed out of obligation. I folded them into a pile for donation. Then the shoes. The ties. Even a navy blazer I hadn't worn since our daughter's graduation. By the end, my closet looked half empty. But the clothes that remained? They were mine. That evening, I lit the fire pit in the backyard. The air was cool again, and the flames crackled just loud enough to drown out the occasional car passing on the next street. I sat with a blanket over my lap, a tumbler of bourbon in hand, notebook beside me. I didn't write right away. I just watched the fire. Let it shift and dance and breathe. Fire is a funny thing, destructive, cleansing, mesmerizing. It doesn't ask permission. It just becomes. Eventually, I picked up the pen. And I wrote. She's gone. Really gone now. Not in body, that happened weeks ago. But in spirit. In space. Her absence no longer feels like a wound. It feels like an open window. And what comes through that window now isn't sorrow. It's air. Light. Something I don't need to name to understand. I stared at the words for a while. Then, almost without thinking, I added. I survived her betrayal. I survived the death of our marriage. What I didn't expect was to find myself on the other side. Not just alive, but awake. Mabel stirred beside me, looked up with tired eyes. I reached down and scratched behind her ears. Almost there, girl, I whispered. And I believed it. I always thought endings came with some dramatic sound, a slammed door, a shouted goodbye, the crack of something breaking. But mine came with birdsong and morning light slanting across my kitchen floor. Soft. Ordinary. Real. Lynette left the state 2 days ago. No calls. No texts. No final plea for forgiveness. Just silence. And it was beautiful. I woke up that morning to Mabel gently pressing her nose into my hand. Her silent way of saying, "Hey, we are still here." I scratched her head, made a mental note to schedule her next vet visit, then shuffled downstairs and started the coffee. The smell filled the house, strong, nutty, familiar. I poured a mug and leaned against the counter. The walls were mine now. Every object in the room, every chipped plate and weathered drawer pull, all of it felt like it belonged to someone who'd earned their peace. The last few months felt both impossibly long and suddenly short. Time had done its trick of bending in strange ways, stretching grief, compressing clarity. I grabbed a basket and went out to the garden. The early tomatoes were starting to show. The basil was thick and fragrant. I plucked a few leaves and crushed them between my fingers, breathing in that bright, peppery scent. The dirt was still damp from last night's rain. A worm wriggled near the roots. Life, as always, continued. After breakfast, I got in the truck and drove. Not for errands. Not for escape. Just to see. I took the long road west, out toward the ridge where the town turns into forest and the old fire trails snake up through the trees. I hadn't driven that way in years. Not since our last anniversary picnic, actually. The one we packed with wine and cheese and promises we'd both already stopped keeping. I didn't feel bitterness as I drove past that spot. Just distance. Like remembering a scene from someone else's life. At the top of the ridge, there's a turnout. Wide gravel shoulder, wooden railing, a worn state marker that says, Elkhorn Viewpoint. Elevation 2,900 feet. I parked, stepped out, and walked to the edge. The valley stretched out below, vast and calm. Patches of green and gold where the light hit different angles. The river shimmered like brushed silver in the distance. Clouds hovered low and slow, casting long shadows across the hills. I stood there for a long time. No music. No phones. Just wind. I thought about what I'd lost. What I'd let go. What I'd rebuilt. Lynette was part of my story. A long, complicated, often beautiful part. But she wasn't my ending. Not anymore. I pulled out the notebook, the one that had become more than just paper. It had held my grief, my rage, my confusion, my clarity. And now it would hold my closure. I wrote. Forgiveness isn't for her. It's for me. It's choosing to let go, not because she asked, but because I refuse to keep bleeding for someone who no longer matters. Then, on the next line. This is not a scar I hide. It's one I earned. I closed the notebook, tucked it back in my coat. Before I left, I picked up a smooth stone from the ground and tossed it over the railing, down into the trees. Not as a metaphor. Just because I felt like it. The sound it made as it disappeared into the brush was quiet, final. Back home, I spent the rest of the day cleaning out the last room I hadn't touched, the upstairs guest room. It still held some of Lynette's old boxes, things she said she'd come back for someday. She wouldn't. So I opened them. Most of it was meaningless now, sweaters out of season, half-used candles, stacks of romance novels she never finished. I packed them neatly into donation bags. Left the ones that felt personal in a box on the porch with a note. Gone. But not forgotten. Just no longer needed. At sunset, I sat on the back steps with a grilled cheese sandwich and a beer. Simple meal. No ceremony. Just sustenance. Mabel leaned against my side. The sky turned amber, then indigo. Crickets started their chorus. And I realized something, clear and sharp. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not for her to change. Not for a new chapter to begin. Not for some cosmic sign that I'd done enough healing. I was living. Right here. Right now. Not as a man who'd been broken. But as a man who'd rebuilt. And this time, I didn't build for two. I built for one. And that was more than enough.